What does it take to rule a country like North Korea? Power, fear, and corruption. But at what cost? In this video, we will uncover how the elite in North Korea use corruption to maintain control, the reality behind their leadership, and why so many people are risking their lives to escape. North Korea is one of the most secretive and oppressive regimes in the world. From its elite class profiting off the suffering of citizens to the constant control over every aspect of life, the story of corruption in North Korea is deeply tied to the survival of its dictatorship. In any country, the ruler must maintain control to stay in power. But in North Korea, the stakes are higher than anywhere else. The regime survives because it follows a set of rules that are designed to keep the power structure intact, even at the expense of the citizens' well-being. Control the military. North Korea's military is not just a tool for defense, it's the backbone of the regime. Kim Jong Un inherited control of one of the largest standing armies in the world. His leadership depends on the absolute loyalty of this military force, which he's managed to maintain through fear, ideology, and strict control. The military is given priority, with a large portion of the country's budget spent on weapons and resources for the army. The military's loyalty is crucial for the survival of the regime. If the military were to turn against Kim Jong Un, it could topple the entire structure. This is why the regime goes to such lengths to protect military leaders and ensure that soldiers are brainwashed into loyalty from a young age. Every North Korean citizen undergoes compulsory military service, reinforcing the idea that the survival of the regime is their personal duty. 2. Control the money. While the people of North Korea starve, the elite class thrives on the wealth generated from corruption and control over the country's financial resources. Kim Jong Un and his family control the nation's largest and most profitable enterprises, including those related to mining, manufacturing, and even drug trafficking. This enables them to live in luxury, while the average citizen struggles with poverty. In fact, much of North Korea's wealth comes from illegal activities, such as smuggling, cybercrime, and selling weapons on the black market. The regime has a history of using these funds to fuel its military ambitions and maintain control over its population. Despite the international sanctions meant to curb these activities, the regime finds ways to bypass these restrictions and keep the money flowing. The elites are incentivized to stay loyal because they are the direct beneficiaries of the regime's policies. In exchange for their loyalty, high-ranking officials are given access to state resources and participate in the illegal economy. This relationship between corruption and power keeps the regime stable, as the elite class has every reason to protect their privileged position. 3. Control the people. The third pillar of the North Korean regime is perhaps the most important. Control over the people. To maintain power, Kim Jong Un's government has created a surveillance state unlike any other. The government watches every move of its citizens, tracking their movements, their conversations, even their thoughts. Loyalty to the regime is demanded not only through fear, but through constant surveillance and indoctrination. Citizens are taught to worship Kim Jong Un and his family as divine figures, and public loyalty is demanded at all times. Those who dissent, or even express suspicion of the regime, face brutal punishment, often execution or internment in labor camps. The regime ensures control through a network of spies and informants, with most citizens living in constant fear of being accused of disloyalty. This has resulted in a society where trust is virtually non-existent, and the people are forced to live in fear, knowing that any misstep could result in harsh punishment not just for themselves, but for their families. In essence, North Korea operates as a totalitarian state, where the people are seen as pawns to be controlled and manipulated to maintain the power of the ruling family. At the top of North Korea's power structure, corruption isn't just a problem. It's embedded in the very fabric of the regime. In fact, corruption is essential to the survival of the Kim family's dictatorship. The elites in North Korea don't just benefit from corruption, they rely on it to maintain their positions of power and privilege. The survival of the regime hinges on an intricate web of illegal enterprises and power struggles within the leadership. The Kim family, masters of the system. At the center of this corruption is Kim Jong Un and his family, who have ruled North Korea since its inception. The Kim family holds absolute power and has built an empire of corruption that stretches across the country and beyond its borders. Kim Jong Un, like his father and grandfather before him, has inherited a system where loyalty is rewarded with access to wealth, resources, and power. The regime has carefully cultivated a sense of fear and loyalty among its top officials. Any sign of disloyalty is swiftly punished, which ensures that the elites are kept in line. Yet for those who remain loyal to Kim Jong Un, there are significant rewards. The Kim family uses a complex system of patronage, where key allies are given control over major industries and state-owned enterprises. This not only strengthens their ties to the regime, but also keeps them invested in maintaining the status quo. Those at the top of the political ladder thrive through their access to resources, and they are incentivized to keep the system intact. Corruption in North Korea reaches all the way to the top. High-ranking officials, including those in the government, military, and the ruling party, are deeply involved in a variety of illegal enterprises. From smuggling luxury goods to conducting illicit financial dealings with foreign countries, the elite are shameless in their pursuit of wealth. Luxury items like rare cars, expensive electronics, and designer clothing are freely available to the top officials, who are allowed to live lives of excess, while ordinary North Koreans struggle to find food or basic necessities. But the wealth of the elites doesn't come from state resources alone. Much of it is derived from shady dealings with foreign actors, including countries and companies that violate international sanctions. North Korea's extensive network of smuggling operations, ranging from coal and textiles to weapons and drugs, generates billions of dollars that feed the pockets of the ruling class. For instance, the regime's involvement in the global black market is staggering. North Korea is known to sell arms and technology to rogue states, including Iran and Syria. Additionally, the country is involved in illicit financial schemes, such as money laundering and cybercrimes. North Korea's hackers have been linked to several major cyber attacks around the world, including the infamous 2014 Sony hack and cyber theft of over $1 billion from foreign banks. The revenue from these illegal activities often flows directly into the regime's coffers, reinforcing the power of the Kim family and the elite. The power struggles within the elite class. Even within the elite, power struggles are constant. North Korea's ruling class is a group of highly ambitious individuals, each vying for more wealth and influence. There's a delicate balance in this world. Too much ambition can lead to a downfall, while too little can lead to being overlooked or sidelined. Kim Jong-un's leadership is marked by his ability to eliminate rivals and keep the elite in check, often through purges and executions. For example, in 2013, Kim Jong-un had his own uncle, Jang Song-thaek, executed for allegedly plotting a coup. This was a stark reminder to the elites. Loyalty is rewarded, but disloyalty is fatal. Even in this environment of fear, the elites continue to protect and perpetuate the system of corruption that serves them. With the regime's constant need for funds to maintain its military and elite lifestyle, these power struggles have only become more intense. The competition for control over lucrative black market industries has sparked multiple internal conflicts. As a result, the elites must walk a fine line between advancing their own wealth and maintaining the loyalty required to keep their positions. The price of corruption. A nation in ruin. While the ruling class lives in luxury, the rest of North Korea's population bears the brunt of this corruption. Resources that could be used to improve the country's infrastructure, provide healthcare, or support education are funneled into the regime's coffers, with the military taking priority. As a result, the country remains one of the poorest in the world, with widespread food insecurity, lack of healthcare, and a lack of basic freedoms. This corruption has turned North Korea into a country where wealth and power are concentrated in the hands of a few, while the majority of citizens suffer in silence. The vast majority of North Koreans live under constant surveillance, in fear of being accused of disloyalty, while the elites enjoy the fruits of a corrupt system. This stark divide has created a deeply unequal society, where the regime's survival is directly tied to its ability to maintain this power imbalance. The harsh realities of life in North Korea have led many citizens to take extreme measures to escape the grip of Kim Jong Un's totalitarian regime. For most of the world, the idea of living in a society where the government controls every aspect of life is unimaginable. Yet for North Koreans, it's a daily reality. People are constantly oppressed, surveilled, and punished for the smallest acts of dissent. It's no wonder that thousands of North Koreans risk everything to escape, even if it means defying the odds in one of the most perilous journeys on Earth. North Korea is a country that punishes disloyalty with extreme severity. Even the smallest expression of disagreement with the regime can lead to life-altering consequences. Under Kim Jong Un's rule, dissent is not tolerated, and those suspected of challenging the regime face public humiliation, torture, forced labor, and even execution. It's not just the individual who is punished. Often entire families are sent to labor camps as a form of collective punishment, ensuring that loyalty to the regime is maintained at all costs. For many North Koreans, the idea of escaping is not just about seeking a better life, it's a matter of survival. The constant fear of being accused of disloyalty, whether real or fabricated, creates a pressure cooker environment. Even simple acts of defiance, such as speaking negatively about the government, consuming foreign media, or even attempting to flee, can result in severe punishment. The absurdity of life under the regime. Life in North Korea is a carefully orchestrated lie. Citizens are taught to worship the Kim family, and everything in their daily lives is dictated by the regime. The government controls what people see, what they read, and even what they think. Everyday items like food, clothing, and technology are strictly rationed. For the majority of North Koreans, these basic essentials are not only scarce, they are often of poor quality. Imagine living in a country where you don't have access to free information, where foreign media, including websites, movies, and television shows, are strictly forbidden, where the most basic human rights, like freedom of speech, freedom of movement, and the right to a fair trial, are denied. This is the reality for most North Koreans. For many, it's a life spent in complete isolation from the outside world, with only state propaganda to guide their understanding of reality. It's no wonder that many North Koreans, particularly the younger generation, yearn for something more. They dream of a life free from surveillance and control, a life where they can make their own choices, and where they can finally escape the relentless indoctrination they've been subjected to for their entire lives. The treacherous journey to freedom. For those who dare to escape, the journey is incredibly dangerous. The path to freedom often begins with the decision to leave one's family behind, knowing that, if caught, the consequences will be severe. North Koreans who attempt to escape the country are considered traitors, and if they are apprehended, they face a high likelihood of torture, execution, or years in a labor camp. The first step in escaping is crossing the border into China. But the border is heavily guarded, and the risk of being caught is extremely high. If a defector is captured by Chinese authorities, they are often sent back to North Korea, where they face horrific punishment for attempting to flee. Those who manage to cross into China face an uncertain and often perilous journey. China, which shares a long border with North Korea, has been known to deport defectors back to North Korea. However, there are underground networks of human rights organizations and individuals who help guide defectors through this dangerous route, offering refuge in countries like South Korea or Thailand. Some defectors are forced to live in hiding for years, fearing discovery at any moment. The road to freedom is long and uncertain, and many face hardship, abuse, and even trafficking during their journey. Despite the odds, countless North Koreans risk everything for the chance to live freely. It's important to understand that North Koreans do not leave because they want a better life in the material sense. They leave because they have no other choice. The suffering in North Korea is so severe that it drives people to make unimaginable sacrifices. Defectors are often forced to leave their families behind, knowing that they may never see them again. Some have reported that their families were punished simply for their attempts to escape, further illustrating the brutality of the regime. For many, the idea of freedom is more than just escaping the regime's brutality. It's about reclaiming their dignity. It's about being able to make choices for themselves, to think for themselves, and to live a life without the oppressive shadow of the Kim family looming over them. The unbreakable human spirit. Despite the unimaginable risks, the courage of these defectors is a testament to the unbreakable human spirit. The desire for freedom, for a better life, is something that can never be completely suppressed, no matter how hard the regime tries to control the minds and bodies of its people. And every person who escapes, every defector who fights for their freedom, is a reminder that even in the darkest of times, hope persists. The leadership of North Korea, under Kim Jong Un, not only affects the lives of its own citizens, but also has far-reaching implications for the entire world. From the weapons programs to its alliances, North Korea's policies and actions have a direct impact on global security, economics, and diplomacy. The world is watching a regime that thrives on secrecy, defies international norms, and constantly tests the limits of what the global community will tolerate. 1. The threat of nuclear weapons. One of the most significant global implications of North Korea's leadership is its relentless pursuit of nuclear weapons. Despite widespread international condemnation, North Korea has continued to develop its nuclear program, conducting numerous tests, and claiming to have achieved the ability to launch a nuclear strike. For Kim Jong Un, nuclear weapons are not just a means of defense. They are a symbol of the regime's power and an essential tool for survival. The development of nuclear weapons has put North Korea at odds with nearly every country, particularly its neighbors, South Korea and Japan, as well as the United States. The presence of nuclear weapons in such a volatile region has escalated tensions and raised concerns about the possibility of a nuclear conflict. North Korea's weapons tests often send shockwaves through the global community, triggering sanctions, heightened military preparedness, and diplomatic back and forth between world powers. Despite this, Kim Jong Un's regime has shown no signs of backing down. The regime views its nuclear arsenal as a necessary deterrent to foreign intervention and as a means to project power on the global stage. For the rest of the world, however, it represents a destabilizing force that could potentially lead to catastrophic consequences. The question remains, how far will the world go to prevent a full-scale nuclear arms race in Northeast Asia? 2. The impact on global diplomacy. North Korea's aggressive stance has complicated international diplomacy for decades. The United Nations and various countries have imposed heavy sanctions on the regime in an effort to curb its nuclear ambitions and human rights abuses. However, these sanctions have had little effect on Kim Jong Un's resolve. The regime continues to trade weapons, cyber attacks, and other illicit goods with countries that are willing to bypass sanctions, often rogue states looking to bolster their own positions. One of the most significant diplomatic challenges is North Korea's relationship with China. China has long been North Korea's most important ally, providing essential trade and political support. While China has sometimes called for denuclearization and endorsed international sanctions, its support of North Korea remains a key factor in the regime's survival. This complicates global efforts to hold North Korea accountable and create a unified international front against its behavior. China has historically viewed North Korea as a buffer against Western influence and a strategic partner in the region, which means that many diplomatic initiatives designed to contain North Korea's threat have been hindered by Beijing's reluctance to fully cut ties. At the same time, North Korea's provocations have also led to shifting alliances in the region. For instance, countries like South Korea, Japan, and the United States have strengthened their military alliances, while smaller nations have sought to increase their influence by engaging with North Korea. These shifting alliances contribute to regional instability and create a delicate balance of power that could be easily disrupted by North Korea's unpredictable behavior. 3. The economic consequences. While North Korea is one of the most isolated countries in the world, its policies and actions still have a significant economic impact. The sanctions imposed on North Korea have isolated the country from much of the global economy. However, these sanctions also ripple outward, affecting regional trade dynamics. Neighboring countries like South Korea, China, and Russia are directly impacted by the instability and unpredictability of the North Korean regime. South Korea, in particular, bears the brunt of this economic volatility. The country faces constant pressure to respond to North Korea's provocations, which often lead to economic disruptions, including a slowdown in trade and foreign investment. South Korea's economy is tightly linked to its northern neighbor, especially when it comes to industries like energy, transportation, and technology. Any sudden escalation in hostilities can result in significant losses, both in terms of trade and national security. The global economic consequences also extend beyond the immediate region. International businesses and investors have to constantly reassess the risk of doing business with North Korea, or even in neighboring countries that may be affected by the instability. Moreover, the sanctions imposed on North Korea impact a wide range of industries, from energy to technology, creating economic ripple effects across the globe. The human rights crisis. The human rights situation in North Korea has also become a focal point in global discussions about the regime. With some of the most oppressive conditions in the world, North Korea has been widely condemned for its treatment of its citizens. People are subjected to forced labor, arbitrary detention, torture, and execution. Even those who manage to escape the country face the risk of being sent back to face brutal punishment. International human rights organizations have documented countless atrocities, including the existence of political prison camps where individuals, often entire families, are subjected to forced labor, starvation, and harsh punishment for perceived disloyalty. Yet, despite the overwhelming evidence, the international community has struggled to take meaningful action to stop these abuses. The geopolitical realities, particularly the role of China in protecting North Korea from the worst consequences, have made it difficult to address this crisis head-on. Moreover, the North Korean regime continues to use its human rights abuses as a means to control its population, ensuring that its citizens remain loyal and obedient to the state. The international community is often left in a moral quandary, as efforts to hold North Korea accountable for its abuses are frequently undermined by political and economic considerations. 5. The future of North Korea and global security. The future of North Korea remains uncertain. As long as the regime continues to focus on consolidating power through corruption, military force, and propaganda, it will likely remain a destabilizing force in the region. The international community's attempts to engage with North Korea through diplomacy, sanctions, and direct talks have had limited success, and the regime's refusal to comply with international norms and regulations continues to pose a significant challenge to global peace and security. However, there is a growing consensus that North Korea's leadership is unsustainable in the long term. The combination of internal corruption, external pressures, and a growing dissatisfaction among the people may eventually lead to change, either through reform, collapse, or a popular uprising. While the world may not know when or how it will happen, one thing is clear. The global implications of North Korea's actions will continue to shape international relations and global security for years to come. While North Korea's future remains shrouded in uncertainty, there is a growing understanding that the status quo is unsustainable. The country's political, economic, and social isolation, combined with its aggressive nuclear pursuits, creates a volatile situation not only for the Korean peninsula, but for the entire world. However, in recent years, there have been attempts, both internally and externally, to create avenues for change, offering a glimmer of hope for the future. But the road to reform is long, fraught with challenges, and requires a level of global cooperation that has yet to be achieved. 1. The possibility of internal reform. One of the most complex and delicate issues surrounding North Korea's future is the possibility of internal reform. For decades, the country has been ruled with an iron fist, but the question remains, is the regime capable of change? Historically, North Korea has rejected any form of political liberalization or economic reform, despite the overwhelming evidence that the country's economic model is failing its people. However, there are some signs that change could eventually come from within. The younger generation in North Korea, who have had more exposure to the outside world through smuggled media or interactions with foreign entities, are increasingly frustrated with their government's strict policies and the suffering it causes. While the government continues to indoctrinate citizens, a growing awareness of the outside world is slowly challenging the narrative that the regime has worked so hard to maintain. Some analysts suggest that the regime's growing reliance on technology, cyber attacks, and digital surveillance could eventually lead to a more open society, albeit a controlled one. The internet, while tightly regulated, has become an important tool for North Koreans to access foreign news and information, even if it means taking risks to do so. This exposure to the outside world could eventually create a tipping point, where citizens demand more freedoms, increased access to resources, and an end to their oppression. But as history has shown, the Kim regime's survival instincts are formidable, and any attempt at significant reform could be met with fierce resistance. The regime is built on a cult of personality, and any challenge to its power could lead to destabilization, not only within the country but potentially across the entire region. For now, the regime remains firmly in control, and any potential reform efforts would require a profound shift in both leadership and societal attitudes. 2. External pressures and sanctions. The international community has played a significant role in attempting to curb North Korea's nuclear ambitions and its human rights abuses. Through sanctions, diplomatic pressure, and direct negotiations, the global powers have sought to alter North Korea's behavior. However, despite years of pressure, North Korea's leadership remains defiant, continuing to pursue its weapons programs and reject international demands for reform. Sanctions imposed by the United Nations and individual countries like the United States have had a substantial impact on North Korea's economy, severely restricting trade and access to critical resources. Yet the effectiveness of these sanctions is undermined by countries like China, which continues to provide North Korea with economic and political support. The Chinese government views North Korea as a strategic buffer against Western influence in the region, and as a result, it has been reluctant to take stronger actions that could destabilize the regime. One potential avenue for change could be through more targeted and effective sanctions that cut off the regime's access to essential resources while minimizing the impact on the civilian population. However, the difficulty lies in ensuring that these sanctions are enforced uniformly and effectively across all international borders, including those of China and Russia. Without full international cooperation, sanctions alone are unlikely to create the kind of pressure needed to bring about meaningful change. 3. Diplomacy and engagement with the regime. While sanctions and pressure have dominated the international approach, some argue that diplomacy remains the most effective way to engage with North Korea. In recent years, there have been efforts to open dialogue between North Korea and the United States, as well as other regional powers. The 2018 summit between Kim Jong Un and U.S. President Donald Trump, while ultimately unsuccessful in its goals, marked a rare moment of diplomatic engagement. For many, diplomacy represents the best hope for de-escalating tensions and creating conditions that might allow for meaningful reform. Engaging North Korea diplomatically is seen as a way to encourage incremental steps toward peace, security, and even human rights improvements. The challenge, however, is finding a balance between pressure and engagement that does not reward the regime for its provocative actions, but still opens the door for negotiation. Countries like South Korea have been particularly vocal about the potential for engagement, arguing that opening communication channels with North Korea is the only way to avoid further conflict and instability. South Korea's efforts to engage in dialogue and promote peace on the Korean peninsula have been a key aspect of its foreign policy. However, the success of these diplomatic efforts depends on North Korea's willingness to negotiate and its ability to make meaningful concessions, which has historically been rare. The role of regional powers. Regional powers, particularly China and Russia, play a crucial role in shaping the future of North Korea. As North Korea's primary trading partners and diplomatic supporters, their actions, or inactions, will determine the extent to which the regime is isolated or integrated into the global community. China's role is especially significant. As North Korea's largest trading partner, China wields considerable influence over the regime. However, Beijing has consistently prioritized stability in the region over harsh actions against North Korea. The Chinese government fears that pushing North Korea too hard could result in a collapse of the regime, potentially leading to a flood of refugees into China and a shift in the regional balance of power. As a result, China has often been reluctant to impose severe sanctions on North Korea, choosing instead to advocate for dialogue and stability. Russia, similarly, has maintained a strategic relationship with North Korea, offering diplomatic support and providing an alternative to Western influence. Both China and Russia have worked together to block more aggressive UN sanctions, arguing that North Korea's security concerns need to be addressed before any real progress can be made on denuclearization. 5. The hope for change. While the path to change in North Korea may seem daunting, it is not without hope. The increasing flow of information into the country, the growing frustration of the younger generation, and the continued efforts of defectors to expose the regime's cruelty all represent a slow but steady shift. The international community must continue to push for accountability, support defectors, and explore avenues for engagement, while acknowledging the difficulties involved. Ultimately, the key to change lies in finding a balance between diplomacy, sanctions, and internal pressure. The regime cannot continue indefinitely in its current form, and as long as the global community remains committed to addressing the North Korean crisis, there is hope that one day the people of North Korea will be able to live in a society where their basic human rights are respected, and where the regime's stranglehold on power is finally broken. If you want to learn more about global corruption and the stories that don't make the headlines, subscribe to our channel. We post new documentaries every month exploring the dark realities shaping our world.